Welcome to the Chalkboard, my fellow football nerds, for episode number 42 of Chalk Talk, brought to you by the Painted Lines. I'm your host, Shane Half. You can follow me on Twitter at @halfandhalf_TPL. I'm joined today by the best co-host in the game. You've seen him on the Tough Cover Pod. It's Mark Henry Jr. You can give him a follow on Twitter at @MarkHenryJr_. Mark, how are you doing today?
Doing well. Excited to talk some Super Bowl. We got a great guest.
Yeah, we do have a great guest. Joining us today, also another Mark, which won't be confusing at all. It's Mark Schofield. You can follow him on Twitter at Mark Schofield. You can follow his work at Touchdown Wire for USA Today. Mark does fantastic work. Read a couple of articles that he put out about the passing concepts that both teams should be using in the Super Bowl and wanted to get him on to talk about it. So really excited he's here. Guest Mark, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, gentlemen. It's great to be here. Excited to talk about this game. I'm glad we're finally into Super Bowl week, the build-up, the bye week. It tends to drag a little bit. Now we can finally start diving in, and I'm excited to do just that.
Yeah, if you guys are not following Mark, be sure you give him a follow on Twitter. He does some great YouTube content breaking down draft prospects. You can definitely learn a lot from the content that Mark puts out there. So, Mark, without any further ado, I just want to dive into it here. I read your articles. You wrote an article about the Cincinnati Bengals and how they can attack the Rams' split field safety looks. And then you put out another one, I think it was today, or I saw it today, about how the Detroit Lions can sort of attack the Cincinnati Bengals dropping 8 into coverage. So I just want to kind of give you some reign to talk about, what are some keys for the Rams? How do the Rams attack this matchup? How do they win the Super Bowl? And on the flip side, what can the Bengals do to go win this game?
Yeah, I think looking at it from the Rams' perspective, and let's sort of start when they have the football. I think a couple of things that the Rams will need to do. They're going to need to have some answers for if and when the Bengals drop 7, drop 8 into coverage. Looking at, some stats this year, I think on like over 500 plays or so, the Bengals rushed 4 fewer pass rushers. And it was 64 snaps this year when they used that drop 8 coverage, which was, I think, like 5th or 6th most in the league. And we saw what they were able to do against the Kansas City Chiefs in the AFC Championship game when they went to that drop 8 stuff. 45% of their snaps in the second half and overtime were in that drop 8 coverage. Mahomes got sort of frustrated. He couldn't find throwing lanes. And so that's going to be one key for the Rams when they have the ball. Are they going to be able to, when they go light box, when they go with 8 in coverage, when they go with 7 in coverage, have some success? Now, if you're a Rams fan, there's pros and cons to this. Like there's some ways you might be excited, and there's some reasons why you might be a little bit scared. Mostly this year against sort of drop 7, when teams have just rushed 4, Stafford's been pretty good. Like I think he's got an adjusted net yards per attempt of like 7.7 when defenses have used sort of 7 in coverage against him, which was, top 7 or so in the league. But he's been really bad against drop 8. He's thrown 2 picks, one of which was a tip through Cooper Kupp's hands, but the other was a really bad interception. He had a near interception against the Colts on drop 8. So when the Bengals do that, and I do think they're going to for a reason we'll get into in a second, will Stafford be patient or will he make mistakes? The other thing to watch when the Rams have the football, how do the Bengals defend Cooper Kupp? That's obviously going to be a huge part of this game. Kupp's so dangerous, particularly out of the slot. I looking it up, he's got, I think, almost 2,000 yards receiving this year, 1,500 of which have come from him aligned in the slot. 13 of his 16 touchdowns have come with him aligned in the slot. One of their favorite concepts, that choice stucco concept, where they put him in a stack, sometimes with Higbee, sometimes with Odell. And he's got basically a 3-way go as the back alignment receiver in that stack slot. He can break out or in based on the leverage of the nearest defender, or he can just sit down versus zone. So how do they defend him? Do they do what, for example, some other teams have done, where they use drop that drop 7, drop 8, get that outside edge defender to drop underneath to the inside and have the corner play with outside leverage? Do they just put a Chidobe Awuzie on him? Do they put a Mike Hilton on him? Because Hilton and Kupp have had run in before, back when Hilton was with the Steelers, and Hilton fared pretty well against him. Laurie Fitzpatrick pulled that up on Twitter. Kupp didn't have any receptions that game back in 2019 with Mike Hilton on him in coverage. And so that might be something that the Bengals look to do. So how do they defend Cooper Kupp? The other thing with the Rams have the football, is their running game ever going to be a factor in the playoffs? Their run game has been brutal If you go to Ben Baldwin's site, rbdsm.com, you can look up like the team tiers, and by EPA per rush attempt, the Rams by far are the worst run game in the playoffs. Like it's negative 0.45 EPA per rush attempt this year. By and large, the worst of any team left in the playoffs. They've had 3 run-in plays, I think, over 10 yards in the postseason. The first was their first offensive play against the Cardinals, and then they've had a jet sweep to Van Jefferson against the Buccaneers, and Cam Akers had a nice run against the Rams. That's it. 3 plays over 10 yards rushing. Is that run game going to be a factor at all, especially if the Bengals go light, especially if they're dropping 7 or 8? That could be sort of an undercurrent, underrated thing to watch. When the Bengals have the football, look, can they protect Joe Burrow? I mean, that's been the story of this playoffs. Burrow's been sacked 12 times in the postseason. He's been pressured, I think, 45 times in the postseason. Obviously, look, he's played a lot of games. He's played 3, so that could be part of it with a counting statistic, but Stafford's played the same amount of games. He's only been pressured 31 times. I mean, he's sacked 9 times by the Titans. And the thing about the Titans is they're a good comp for the Rams because they do so much with just 4-man rushes. And so same thing with the Rams. And so are they going to be able to protect Joe Burrow? But if they can't, will it even matter? Burrow has been almost lights out this postseason when pressured. An adjusted completion percentage for Pro Football Focus, 79.2 when pressured this postseason. I mean, he's been incredible under pressure. So even if they can't protect him, it might not matter. And then you get into the split safety coverage stuff because the Rams, with Raheem Morris, they do a lot of 2 high, cover 2, cover 4, cover 6, quarter, half. What happens when they do that? Who wins sort of in the middle of the field? Does Troy Reader have the ability to take away some of those digs, some of those in-breaking routes that Burrow likes to throw? They love to run dagger, inside vertical route, outside dig, try to get that middle linebacker carrying that vertical and throw the dig route behind him. Or do they go single high to try to take that stuff away? And if so, do we get Jamar Chase versus Jaylen Ramsey in a one-on-one battle all afternoon? Because Chase has been put as an isolated receiver over 200 times, 5th most in the league this year. They've done a lot more of it down the stretch. Stephen Ruiz at the Rainer wrote about that, and really nice piece over there talking about they will put Chase singled up to one side. If Burrow likes the matchup, he could take it. If he doesn't like the matchup, he'll work the concept to the front side. If you're in that 2 high look where you're giving safety help over the top to Chase, now the Bengals have a numbers advantage to the concept side. Does Raheem Morris do that, or does he take Ramsey, put him singled up on Chase, and then try to even off the numbers to the concept side? So those are some of the things that I'm going to be watching for on Sunday. Those are, I think, sort of the keys to this game, those sort of questions I've outlined.
You mentioned the Bengals dropping 8 and how well that worked in the second half against the Chiefs. It's something that they did in the first half too, and it just didn't really work at all. Something I was watching that game in the first half thinking they just needed to stop. And for whatever reason, they sort of locked that down in the second half. And you mentioned the numbers with Stafford against 8 dropping into coverage. Now, admit it, that's a pretty small sample size on the season. How much of that do you think is, an anomaly based on small sample size? Do you think this is a huge concern for the Lions? It seems like something that we just don't have a lot of data on, which makes it really exciting for me to try to project how that's going to play out.
Yeah, Shane, I mean, I think it's more sort of a smaller sample size issue. I mean, when the Rams made the trade for Stafford, the night that broke, I made the case that the reason they did it was because Jared Goff had a trait that was holding them back. And it was his hesitation, his indecisiveness. You look at, Super Bowl 53, the critical play in that game was when Goff was late on a post route to Brandon Cooks in the back of the end zone that gave Jason McCourty time to break from the other side of the field to break it up. If Stafford doesn't hesitate, if Goff doesn't hesitate in that moment, it's a touchdown. And we're talking about a completely different game. Maybe the Rams win that one. Maybe we're talking about Jared Goff is in this game with the Rams rather than watching it at home with the Lions right now. And so when they made that trade, my thought was they want somebody that's just going to be decisive with the football. And when you're talking about drop 7, drop 8, as a quarterback, you have to be very decisive because if you hesitate, if you pull the ball down, the numbers disadvantage really works against you at that moment. And, a piece I've got coming out for USA Today that will probably go up tomorrow, I've got another example of Stafford against drop 8 where he just pulls the football down, gets himself into trouble, and throws a near interception to a defensive tackle who dropped off the line for the Colts and got under a shallow crosser from Van Jefferson. I think if Stafford is as decisive as he can be, and in the piece you read, Shane, I showed moments where he's very decisive, even against drop 8. I think he'll be okay. But if we see that indecisiveness, if you see him hesitating and double clutching on throws, that's when it's going to be a problem. You're absolutely right. It's a smaller sample size. So it's not like we've got 600 throws to work through. We could say, yeah, he's bad against drop 8. He's been bad in limited moments. There's a bit of a interception luck because, like I said, one of the 2 picks went through Cooper Kupp's hands, and it should have been a big play. So we'll see on Sunday night if and when the Bengals do that, if Stafford is good or bad against it.
I had a quick question about the Bengals, actually, because you mentioned the Rams running game really struggling, and that makes sense because they're kind of doing it by committee. Akers just got back. They were plugging and playing all year long. But the Bengals, one of their strengths as a team is supposed to be that they have an all-world running back in Joe Mixon. But if you look at his stats, he's only went over 66 yards in one of the last 8 games. And if you look at the play calling from last week, 17 of his 21 runs came on first down. And they ran 2/3 of his runs this year, came in 11 personnel. The Rams are a great rushing defense. They allow the second fewest rush yards to 11 personnel. They're top 5 in every running defensive metric. What's the Bengals' plan, do you think, going to be? It seems like they're going to have to win this game through the air. And if they are going to run the ball, they're going to have to be a little bit more creative. So do you think that they're going to continue the way that they were running the ball so much on first down, or is that something they're going to change up this week?
Yeah, Mark, I honestly think that this is a game that if you're a fan of the running game, if you love running back play, you might want to sit this one out, because I really think this is going to be a game that's going to be decided, with Burrow and his arm over Stafford and what he's doing in the air. Because, we talked about the Rams' struggles running the football. This is not a defense you want to run the football against. They can stop the run with 4. They can stop the run because of Aaron Donald. It's a game where I think Zach Taylor's going to want to spread them out, go empty, go 5 wide, and really try to get the ball out of Burrow's hands quickly. I think running into the teeth of that defense is going to be tough. And like you said, Marcus, particularly against the Chiefs, running so often on first down gets you into 2nd and 9, 2nd and 10 situations. If you're struggling, that's not where you want to be, particularly against this Rams defensive front. So I really think that they'll probably throw more on first down. They'll throw more in early downs. They might mix in some play action on early downs to try to sort of flip that script a little bit. And there will have to be a little creative in the run game, whether it's the use of some fly sweep stuff, some jet sweep stuff, some stuff with Jamar Chase in the run game. We saw them break that out against the Raiders. You might do some stuff like that. You might get some runs on 2nd down, some draw plays and things like that. So I do think, though, overall, this is going to be a passing game.
What do you look at these 2 quarterbacks? Obviously Joe Burrow getting his first postseason experience, Matthew Stafford not coming into this year with a lot of postseason experience. Which of these quarterbacks would you feel more confident in? If you're a head coach, Stafford's the vet. He's sometimes seems a little bit like a turnover waiting to happen. Burrow's the young guy. He seems like he's got ice in his veins, but he's on the biggest stage he's ever been in. Which guy do you have more confidence in to go out and win a game for you this weekend?
It's a great question, Shane. I mean, there's a case to be made for both of them. But I think right now with the way he's playing and the fact he's been on not as big a stage as this one, but some big stages before in the national title game, SEC championship game, I give the edge to Joe Burrow there. And I think, look, all roads sort of lead back to that 2019 game, Alabama, LSU. That was a national event. I mean, the president was there. I mean, I think at this point, 24 players that played in that game have been drafted in the first round of either the following draft or the one right after that. You're talking about Tua and Burrow and Chase and, Devonta Smith. I mean, just some incredibly talented players played in that game. And Burrow went into Tuscaloosa and won. Then he won a national championship. He, stared down Trevor Lawrence and Clemson and that Brett Venables defense. And, I think Burrow has shown over this playoff run that, like you said, he sort of has ice in his veins. He gets sacked 9 times by Tennessee. It doesn't matter. He's got Chris Jones draped on his back. He skips away from him and picks up a first down with his legs. He makes a mistake. He makes a bad throw. He shakes it off and he immediately comes back and responds on the next drive. And so these are 2 very talented quarterbacks, 2 guys I love watching. But I think right now, with the way they're playing, the way they're both playing, and what Burrow's done before, even if it's in college, I'd give the edge to him in that regard.
So going off that question, because I've kind of been saying all week, I like the Rams to win this game, but I've kind of been saying that Burrow is the one advantage that the Bengals have. And I think most people would look at that running game and say Mixon's an advantage as well. But for the reasons we just went through, I kind of think that's going to end up being a wash. Is there any other kind of area on the Bengals that you can say they have the advantage over the Rams?
No, I mean, Mark, we've probably all seen that meme where they've got like advantages for by position and it's checks for the Rams. And then the other side of that image is just Joe Burrow with the sunglasses and the fur coat. I mean, that's the Bengals' advantage is Burrow and sort of the way he's played. But no, I also think, look, there are things you can point to, where the Bengals have a pathway to win this game. You look at if they can get Jamar Chase going, if he has opportunities against Jaylen Ramsey, if he has opportunities against corners that aren't named Jaylen Ramsey, he can make some big plays. You look at this Bengals defense, and it's kind of flown under the radar what they've done this year, but they're able to get pressure with guys like Hendrickson off the edge, with guys like Hubbard off the edge, with guys like, DJ Reader on the inside. They can get pressure with 4. They can do drop 7, drop 8 stuff like we talked about, which could perhaps force a turnover here and there. And so, I think Burrow is obviously a huge advantage for them. I think he's a tremendously talented quarterback. And, it does seem like there's that sort of it factor with him. There are other things you could point to that could give the Bengals an opportunity to win this game, but I think Burrow is the main reason.
One of the things that I look at that concerns me a little in this game is the Bengals' red zone offense in the playoffs. They seem like a team that's been able to move the ball, but through their playoff games, they've only scored a touchdown on 3 out of their 11 red zone trips. The Bengals have a pretty good red zone defense. If you were Zach Taylor, and I would never put that evil on you, this podcast is not a huge fan of Zach Taylor, but if you were Zach Taylor, what are some things, that you might try to do in the red zone to get across the goal line?
Yeah, I mean, I think, Shane, you're going to see a lot of that 3-by-1 stuff with Chase isolated to the single receiver side, and they're going to give him the opportunity, Burrow, to, if he likes that matchup, take it. You'll see, you'd see like slant routes, not just goal line fades. I really like the opportunity to condense the split a little bit, give him a sort of a 2-way go opportunity to work inside on a slant, work to the boundary, work the fade ball if you don't like that look. And then have that concept to the front side, whether it's sort of a 3-receiver concept, whether it's sort of their stick stuff, which they like to do, their spacing stuff, which they like to do, where, if Burrow gets over the line and he sees Jaylen Ramsey over on Chase, maybe he says, look, I'll work this front side. If he sees a different corner over there, maybe he says, all right, I like that matchup with Chase. I'll trust him to get across the face on the slant. I'll trust him to be a ball winner if we throw back shoulder or something like that. That's where I'd go to. I don't think you're going to be able to just pound it into the end zone with Mixon. Again, like we've talked about the struggles running against this defensive front. So I think you're probably going to have to put it in Burrow's hands, give him that opportunity to make a decision pre-snap and then make a good throw post-snap.
One last question for me here on the Bengals. The Bengals only played 3 games this year, even including the postseason, against top 11.
No, you cut out, Mark. We still can't hear you. Not sure what's going on there.
You got me now?
Yeah, I got you now. Go ahead.
The Bengals played 3 games against top 11 defenses this year. They lost all 3 of those games, and they only scored 19.5 points per game in those games as opposed to 29 points per game in the other games. Is there a chance that we kind of see this Super Bowl turn into what we've seen in a couple Super Bowls recently? We saw it in Super Bowl 58 with Denver, where that D-line took over the game and dominated. We saw it last year where Kansas City's lack of an O-line completely changed their outlook for their entire offseason and what they built. Is there a chance that we're kind of walking out of this game saying the Bengals future's bright, but they need to fix that O-line, and we're walking out of this game and it's like a kind of a boring game that kind of turns into a blowout pretty quickly because of the defensive line?
Yeah, Mark, I mean, I think there's a chance, and I always like to think of the potential outcomes, right? Rams blowout, Rams close win, Bengals close win, Bengals blowout. And I think on the 2 blowout scenarios, a Rams blowout is probably the more likely one, and it does go back to, look, can they protect Burrow? And, I teed that up earlier. Maybe it doesn't matter. Maybe it's like the Titans game. Maybe it's like the Chiefs game where, yeah, he's running for his life back there. He's getting sacked 9 times, but he still finds a way to win. And he's still really good as he's been all postseason long and really all season long. I think his adjusted completion percentage when pressured this year at PFF was top 8, top 7. So he's really been good against pressure all year. And so maybe if he's under duress all afternoon, it won't matter, but maybe it will, and that was sort of the going into last year's Super Bowl. I remember having that same sort of conversation saying, look, out of all the ranges of outcomes, I don't see a Buccaneers blowout. That's what we got. And why? They couldn't protect Mahomes. If it's a scenario where they can't protect him and that pressure starts to force some mistakes, you get a strip sack, you get a turnover, an interception or something like that. Yeah, the game could sort of spin that way. So it's certainly one of the more probable outcomes, I'd say, more probable than, say, a Bengals blowout going the other way, that, you know, that dominated front just sort of takes over. They can't protect Burrow. And that, of course, will tee up everybody that said, yeah, you know, it was nice that you drafted Jamar Chase, but you have Penny Sewell in this game, and maybe you got a shot to win it. Although people will say you might not have even gotten there without Chase. So, I mean, there's two sides of that coin. But, yeah, it's a concern.
All right. Well, Mark, last question here for you. Who's your Super Bowl pick? Give us your score prediction and give us your best guess at MVP.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really of two minds on this one. Sort of my head's telling me, look, like we just talked about, the Rams have more pathways to win this game. But I've talked myself into the Bengals at this point. I just think there's something about Burrow. I think there's something about this team. I hate betting against teams of destiny. I was on the wrong side of that in Super Bowl 52. Like, I know what that feels like. And so I'm going to go with the Bengals in this one, 27-24. And, yeah, if they win, Burrow's MVP.
Right, yeah, it's always a safe bet to take the QB for the team that you pick to win.
Yeah, I mean, there's a part of me that wants to bet like Evan McPherson or somebody like ridiculous like that and just put down like $5 and see if it hits, because, you know, it's a quarterback award. Winning quarterbacks on all likelihood going to win this. So if the Bengals win, I'd have to think Burrow would get MVP.
I think the MVP value, I think, is there with the Rams because of the reasons we said. There's a scenario this game plays out and it's not a quarterback dominated game, it's a defensive dominated game. I don't really see that for Cincy. So if you're going to bet Bengals money line, I would just bet Burrow and Chase to win MVP.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's exactly right, Mark. I think that's a smart play there.
Yeah, I'm really pulling for Von Miller to win the MVP because he'd be only the fourth player to ever win it twice in the Super Bowl, and the other three are all quarterbacks.
That would be pretty cool.
Just think that'd be cool, and it'd be a trivia thing. I'd know, 30 years from now.
Yeah, absolutely.
Bar watching the next Super Bowl or something. But anyways, all right. Well, Mark, thanks for joining in and giving us some of your keys to the game. Tell the people that are watching here where they can find you, what you've got going on.
Yeah, well, guys, thanks for having me. This was a blast. You can find me on Twitter. It's right there at Mark Schofield. As you can see, I finally got the point in the right. USA Today's Touchdown Wire. I've got the 3 questions for when each team has the football. That's going to go up on Wednesday. And then later this week, we're going to have a whole list of predictions and winners, MVPs, prop bets, all sorts of fun stuff like that. So you can check that out later. And like you said, the 2 pieces that are already up, looking at both teams' passing games as we head into Super Bowl 56.
All right. You guys be sure and give Mark a follow. He's got a lot of great content, and hopefully we'll see your face around here some more as we get into draft prep stuff.
I'm sure you will, gentlemen.
The people will wake up on Monday morning with that Super Bowl hangover and gloomy that there's no football, but the march to the draft is just beginning. So I'm excited.
Monday mock draft season is upon us.
It's here. So, all right. Well, thanks again, Mark, for coming on. Really appreciate it, and we will catch you next time.
Thanks so much, guys. Have a good one.
You too. All right. So other Mark. Now we don't have to be confused about Mark. We've got Joe Ciccoletti chiming in on YouTube, said double trouble with the 2 legendary Marks. Going to be interesting to see how Burrow handles the toughest defense he will play in this postseason. Got to give advantage to the Rams. And I know from listening to Mark off the air that's the mind he is of, and that's the direction I'm leaning as well. So let's start on the other side. Mark, let's talk about if the Bengals win this game, why do they win this game? Oh, go ahead.
Real quick, I'm going to let you talk for a second. I just have to grab a laptop charger. Dropping the fourth wall for the listeners, but that's why you won't hear me for the next 20 seconds.
All right. So why the Bengals will win. One of the first things I'm going to point to is that Sean McVay is just bad in big spots in a couple of areas. I think he really struggles with time management, managing his timeouts, the end of half scenarios. You saw another guy in Andy Reid who's really struggled with that. It reared its ugly head in the AFC title game against the Bengals when they got no points after a 1st and goal at the 1 at the end of the first half, and they came out flat in the second half. I don't trust Sean McVay to give them the edge in those situations. I think that he is not aggressive as often as he should be aggressive, particularly with the defense that he has. And I think he struggles to adjust to defenses sometimes. He tends to have a really good offense, but we saw a few years ago when they faced the Patriots with 2 weeks to prepare had all of the answers. And when he went into halftime, he wasn't able to adjust. And he's talked about how he didn't adjust in that game properly. And I think he gets so used to his offense working that when it doesn't, sometimes there's a failure to adjust there. And so, I would rather have Sean McVay than Zach Taylor as my coach in this game, but there's some concerning things with Sean McVay, a guy who's been a great regular season coach, but those little things can often cause big issues in big spots. And so that's one of the things that I'm worried about. Mark, I was just mentioning Sean McVay, issues with time management, lack of aggression in key spots. And then, a couple years ago in the Super Bowl, he just couldn't adjust to a defense that kind of locked him down. And you see those concerns with him sometimes. So that's, if the Bengals win this game, I think a big portion of it could be on Sean McVay. How about you?
The funny thing about that is I know how you feel about the other coach. So we're going into a Super Bowl where we don't feel great about either of the coaches in terms of their in-game decisions. Now, if we're saying who has the coaching advantage, I still think you have to give it resoundingly to Sean McVay and the Rams just because of
unless Joe Burrow's headset goes out again.
Yeah, and he just gets to call the plays, just like yeah. Joe Burrow should unplug the headset in the helmet. But yeah, it's going to be interesting. I'm not really factoring in coaching too much into my pick. I guess it's funny. I was trying to be diplomatic a little bit with my questions there to Mark Schofield, but I think that you could tell with the nature of some of my questions that I'm definitely leaning really hard the one way, and I'm leaning hard that it's not going to be all that close. But so if it was a closer game, I feel like that's when when the teams are 50-50 and you can really talk yourself in to both outcomes, and you say, oh, this team's weaknesses are this, and this team can exploit it. This team's weaknesses are this, and this team can exploit it. I'll really look at the coaching and I'll say, oh, I'll give this team an advantage. But with this game, with there being so many check marks and so many advantages on one side, I do tend to say, okay, I'll kind of call that a wash, even if I don't think it is.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I mean, I would rather have Sean McVay than Zach Taylor, no doubt. But I could see a situation where, similar to the Andy Reid clock management at the end of the halftime,
for sure,
that something could rear its ugly head and snowball. Another thing for the Bengals here is, we've talked about, and we will talk about again, the Rams pass rush when we talk about why we think the Rams will win. But does it even matter? I mean, Joe Burrow is just so clutch under pressure. And in the long term, it matters. You don't want your quarterback taking the hits he's hitting. But for one game, I mean, last week or 2 weeks ago, I guess now, a week and a half ago, he was 7-12 when under pressure. And he had 3 first down scrambles. 2 of them were over 6 yards. And so this is a guy that, even when the offensive line doesn't do its job, he tends to just make things happen. And yeah, it's a bad matchup with Aaron Donald and Von Miller, and we'll get into that, but it just hasn't fazed Burrow much this year. And so I could see that. I don't see the Rams having an answer for T. Higgins. If Jaylen Ramsey shadows Jamar Chase, which is what he's been lobbying to do pretty publicly, which also kind of makes you wonder if that's a little bit of a false herring there, because are you really going to let your star player go out and talk about that? I don't know, but
I don't think there's any telling Jaylen Ramsey what to say. It's just like,
yeah.
I think
but if you do that, then you've got T. Higgins matched up with Darius Williams, a guy that he's got 7 inches and 30 pounds on. And I think that you're going to take that matchup 10 times out of 10 if you're the Bengals. It's why, honestly, if I was sitting here with a chalk, maybe I'd try that in the first half. If it's not working and T. Higgins is just killing us, I would consider putting Ramsey on Higgins and just committing to double teaming Jamar Chase. And I don't think you kind of get into the whole thing that the Seattle Seahawks used to do with where Richard Sherman didn't shadow people. And the idea was, well, he can take away one side of the field. And so if they put their best receiver on the other side, we're sliding safety help there. It kind of gets into that debate. Is the better use for Jaylen Ramsey to shadow Jamar Chase or to take T. Higgins out so you can give extra attention to Chase? And, I think they're going to put Ramsey on Chase, but if Higgins is tearing him up, I'd love to see him make that switch. But I just don't see the answer for T. Higgins. I think it's going to be a big T. Higgins game. I've got money on a parlay for Higgins over 5.5 receptions and 71.5 yards. I think I really like those numbers if they do what I think they're going to do.
It's an interesting debate with the whole Jaylen Ramsey thing. I do think that they're going to start the game out with him covering Chase, with him lobbying so publicly. And I do think that that's where they'll go. But I think that they'd be foolish to not try to throw every possible look that they can at them, especially if things don't go well to start. You can always switch it up. So I think they should be very multiple with the way that they deal with this game and not just stick to one ideology and no matter what, kind of stick with that. That goes for everything. But I think that, if you said, like, gun to my head, make me pick here, I'd probably say what you said. I'd probably double Chase, and I'd probably try to match up Jalen with Higgins, because then the hope is that you can take both guys out with that plan, and hopefully the double won't get picked apart by Chase, even if there's no Ramsey in it. But yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see what they do. But I am of the mindset that is not really the make or break matchup on defense for the Rams.
Yeah. Well, so what do you have for the big matchup here for the Rams, the make or break?
It's so obvious, like, it's so easy, and I'm just kind of repeating what everyone's going to tell you all week, so I'm not going to tell you that I'm some expert or anything. But I do think that the what's going to decide this game is the Rams' defensive line, and specifically Von Miller and Aaron Donald. I think these two guys are the best combo of defensive linemen that they have faced all season, and that's pretty bar none. Like I said, the Bengals only played 3 top 11 defenses, and none of them ranked as high as the Rams did this season. And that's just the Rams. This has been my sports radio, my sports radio take when I've been doing on my radio hits this week. The Cincinnati Bengals are the team of destiny. Joe Burrow is the quarterback of destiny. He's the man of the hour. Destiny can't block Aaron Donald and Von Miller. It just can't. It's Von Miller before last game against San Francisco, which is probably, I know it graded out in some ways as the best O-line in the NFL. I think you're a little bit more up on me than I am with the O-line stuff. I think San Fran would be up near the top on any ranking. So they were able to shut Von Miller out from getting a sack last week. But the 6 previous games that he had played before that on the Rams, he had 6 straight games with a sack. He had 7 sacks in that time span, 2 forced fumbles, a fumble recovery, and a couple passes deflected. So I think that goes to show how much going to the Rams has opened up for, like, having Aaron Donald on his own. That's great. You can put Aaron Donald on a defense, and he's going to make below average defensive linemen average, or he's going to make average defensive linemen above average. But if you can take Von Miller, who maybe there was some questions about how much he still had left in the tank, but he was obviously still pretty good. When you take a guy like that and you put him next to Aaron Donald, we've seen what that's done for him. And any questions about was that move worth it for the Rams, I think you can put that to bed with how good Von Miller's been down the stretch. And I think that I said to Mark Schofield when we talked about it, the value on the MVP bet is with Aaron Donald and Von Miller. I have Aaron Donald at 20-1 and Von Miller at 50-1, both to win Super Bowl MVP, because, and also from the narrative standpoint, from what the writers will vote. Aaron Donald might be the best player in the history of his position. So I don't think he's like a normal defensive player that writers won't want to vote for. And for Von Miller, like you said, there's the built-in wrinkle of him being a second-time Super Bowl MVP. He's obviously a very famous, very well-known player as well. And he's still got it. He's still out there for a large percentage of snaps. He's going to be out there enough to make a huge impact on this game. And whether it be Von Miller getting pressures opens things up for Aaron Donald, or Aaron Donald getting pressures opening things up for Von Miller, I really do think if the Rams win, one of those two will have a really good chance at winning MVP.
Yeah, Joe Ciccoletti chiming in on YouTube says, couldn't agree more. The Rams went up against the Bucs in the divisional round and got 3 sacks and over 6 or 7 QB pressures. And you mentioned Von Miller, a guy who he's just ratcheted it up in the playoffs. His pressure rate in the postseason has doubled. In the regular season, it was at like 9%. It's up to 18% in the playoffs. This Rams team is number 1 in pass block win rate, number 1 in pass rush win rate, and number 1 in run stop win rate. And so you look at this, for as good as Joe Burrow is under pressure, you're going to have Matthew Stafford standing clean, or, standing tall in clean pockets all day. And you're going to have Joe Burrow running for his life all day. And even if there was and I would argue that Joe Burrow's a significantly better quarterback than Matthew Stafford, but Matthew Stafford's still a good quarterback. But if you put, if you put Patrick Mahomes behind the Bengals line, and you put, I don't know, some lower if you put Jalen Hurts don't get mad at me, Eagles. You put Jalen Hurts behind the Rams offensive line, I would argue you could expect similar-ish performances. And so the offensive line is going to play a big part of this. The trenches are going to play a big part in this. And there's no ignoring the fact that Joe Burrow might die in this game. Like, he has not faced a pass rush like this. And he took 9 sacks against Tennessee. He should have taken a ton of sacks last week. He was able to get away.
Mm-hmm.
The Rams are going to rush 4, and they're going to sit back in 2 high looks to take away explosive plays. Can the Bengals really execute long 12, 13, 14 play drives behind an offensive line that's that shaky, that's being rushed by Von Miller and Aaron Donald? They can, but it's almost, you're just gambling every single play. And when you've got to gamble 13, 14 times successfully to go put up points, that's an issue. And that's before we even get to the red zone, where I mentioned to Mark Schofield that the Bengals have been atrocious in the postseason. They've only scored a touchdown on like 26% of their red zone possessions. The Rams were 12th in the league in red zone defense this year. Even if they can put together those long drives, they've got to cap them with touchdowns, not field goals.
I've got 2 questions for you. First, I know we both did our Super Bowl pick at the beginning of the year. Didn't we both pick the Rams to win the NFC? Am I wrong in saying that? I know I did because I have a Super Bowl prop on it, but I believe we both picked the Rams because you had all 4 teams winning or going to the playoffs out of the West, I believe. And you ended, like, 3 of them made it, so it's a pretty good call. But I'm pretty sure that we both had the Rams to win the NFC. I'd be curious to go back and hear that. But the reason I wanted to point that out was because I think if you went back and listened to every pod me and Shane did, especially the recap pods, I think we were probably pretty negative on the Rams for much of the year. And I think that was out of a spot of expecting so much, because when they have the best defensive player in the world in Aaron Donald, they have the best cornerback in the world in Jaylen Ramsey, they have all these pieces on offense, they have a great coach in Sean McVay. I think me and Shane maybe just expected a little bit more out of Matthew Stafford, or we expected to be a little bit more wowed throughout the year. And it kind of reminds me of last year's Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Like, last year's Tampa Bay Buccaneers were 5-5, and then they end up getting going down the stretch, and then they win a couple games in the playoffs, and they did it on the back of their defensive line. And I think the Rams are doing the same thing. And then you think about what has happened since we both presumably picked the Rams to win the NFC. Cooper Kupp has turned into maybe the best receiver in the world, or he at least has majorly leveled up from what we were thinking of him. They added Odell Beckham Jr., who is kind of back to what we expect from Odell Beckham Jr. They added Von Miller, who is back to being prime Von Miller. And they have the main guys that are the reasons we picked them before the season: Matthew Stafford, Aaron Donald, Jaylen Ramsey, all those guys still at the height of their powers, still just as good as we thought they'd be. So I'm finding it hard to really doubt myself. I'm a little bit too confident, and you'll hear that when I run through my list of picks in this game. It's all one-sided, so I could have a very fun or a very, very not so fun Sunday if a certain outcome comes up.
Yeah, I was clicking back through some of the spreadsheets I had, but I don't think I logged that. I logged like all our over-unders and our NFC East draft and all that stuff. I'm pretty sure we both picked the Rams to go to the Super Bowl. I think I picked.
I know I picked the Browns in the AFC. That didn't turn out.
I think I picked the Chiefs, but I can't remember now.
That makes sense.
I do know though that I was 12-4 on my NFC over/under picks.
I'd have to look. I don't think I was that great this year. I think I was probably 50-50 would be my guess, but I'd have to go back and look.
Yeah, we won't talk about my AFC over-unders because that pulled me back down some. But, flipping back to the Bengals side here, you look at the Bengals defense. I think they need to employ the same strategy they did on Mahomes. That rush 3, drop 8 a lot. You don't want to blitz Matthew Stafford. He's number 4 in the league in completion percentage when he's under pressure. He's really good against the blitz. He's got that big arm. He can fire into small windows, and those windows get bigger, obviously, when there's less guys in coverage. The thing for Stafford is he likes to be aggressive. And Mark mentioned he struggled against 3-man rushes this season. He had an adjusted net air yards per attempt of 3.0, which was 25th in the league. He threw a pair of interceptions against 3-man rushes. Now, it wasn't a big sample size. He only faced it I think it was 35, 36 plays this season. But it's something to look at. And Stafford is a guy that we've seen this throughout the season. One of the reasons that we were negative on him at times is that he tends to be a turnover looking for a place to happen. He's number 5th in danger plays. He's number 6 in interceptable passes this year. Now, a lot of those haven't ultimately been intercepted, but the Bengals have a solid secondary. They've got guys that are going to make those plays. You would hope, you're not going to, the Bengals will hope they don't have a Jaquiski Tartt dropping, a punt, an arm punt that ends up costing him the game. And so to me, if the Bengals win this game, it's going to be because Stafford and McVay sort of melt down. And that's not something I'm banking on happening, but it's not something that is out of the realm of possibility for me, because I do have question marks about both of those guys. And it is crazy to me that we're in a Super Bowl and I have doubts about both coaches and I've got questions about both quarterbacks, because that's just not something, you look at last year, it was Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes against Bruce Arians and Tom Brady. Like, you feel pretty rock solid about both quarterbacks and coaches in that game. And in this one, I've got questions about all of those guys. And so I think it could be an exciting Super Bowl. I think there could be a lot of variance here, but I'm kind of with you. I think the Rams are going to win this game. I've got it Rams 27, Bengals 17 is my official prediction.
It's funny because we have other topics to get to, and we were even going to do a whole other thing on the show. I think we could talk about this game for like an hour and a half. I think it's a fascinating game. But I will say that I wish this was 49ers Bengals. I wish Jaquiski Tartt caught that ball. I think it would be an even more fun subplot. I don't know what you think. The line right now in Vegas is Rams -4. I was arguing that I think you could make an argument Bengals 49ers would have been a pick 'em, or -1. Maybe one of the teams would have been -1. I think that would have been right there, right on that pick 'em line. I think it would have basically been just, hey, pick a winner. That would have been pretty fun. We've had a couple close spreads like that in the Super Bowl recently, but I think that Rams, if the goal of the Super Bowl, like all championships are in sports, is to figure out who the best team is, to crown the best team, I think the Rams winning would do that. Because you look at their goal before the season, and it was Super Bowl or bust. You look at all the pieces that they have. You look at all the moves that they made. They went all in on this season, and they beat really good teams to get here. They beat Tom Brady. They sent him into retirement. They came back from down 17-7 against San Francisco. They even beat Arizona in the first round. Obviously, Arizona doesn't look great. Cliff Kingsbury's not a great coach. They blew them out. Arizona was the best wild card team in the NFC for sure. So, the LA Rams had a pretty hard path to get here. I don't know if you can say the same about the Cincinnati Bengals. If the Cincinnati Bengals win, I don't know if you can do the whole we really crowned the best team thing, and not that would feel like a hockey title. The Cincinnati Bengals winning would feel like a hockey title. And I complain about hockey to my hockey fan friends a lot, being like, yeah, but you're not crowning the best team. You're just crowning whatever goalie gets hot in June. And because you see 8 seeds win the Stanley Cup in hockey. In the NFL, in the NBA, I really do think that most of the time they get down to it and you find out who the best team is in the NFL. It wouldn't feel like that with the Bengals. But anyway, that was just a random side I had. That was a thought I had in my head that I had to get out, or else it would have bothered me. To your point on the drop coverage that Mark Schofield brought up, and Mark Schofield made a great point, that the Rams running game is going to be really important because if the Rams are able to run the ball, that's going to force them to cheat that up. That's going to force them to maybe blitz a little bit. That's going to force them to do different things than what they did, which did neutralize Kansas City in the second half. So if the Rams are able to run the ball, I think that the Bengals are pretty much screwed. But if the Rams aren't able to run the ball and they're dropping all that back, maybe this is a low-scoring game. We could see this being a low-scoring game, barring turnovers and short fields and stuff like that. But the Bengals defense has beyond impressed me, but not enough to change the prediction here. If I'm going score, honestly, I haven't even really thought about a score. I know the total's around 40, 48, 49. I'll say Rams 34, Bengals 14, 34-14. That's what I'll go with. Maybe 35-14.
All right, blowout prediction from Mark. And they looked like they were going to get blown out against the Chiefs too. So you never know. I mean, if they get to halftime down 17, they're definitely not going to pack it in. So it'll at least, it wouldn't be one of those games where it's like, man, they're just getting blown out, because they have shown a tendency to play a much better second half. I don't think they want to get in the business of doing that against a team like the Rams with the pass rush like the Rams, but it is interesting kind of think about all the different avenues this game could take.
And the Rams are sure they can give a lead up. We saw against Tampa Bay, they nearly get, what was it, 27-3? They nearly gave up a huge lead. But you segued to two of my picks perfectly with that point about the halftime. I'm taking Rams first quarter minus a half a point, and I'm taking Rams first half minus 2.5. The Rams have started games great other than their last one against San Fran. Their defense is second in DVOA in the first half of games. Then on the other end, the Bengals have started games really slow, as we saw against the Chiefs, even a little bit against the Raiders and the Titans. Those were close games at halftime. The Bengals actually ranked 29th in DVOA offensively in the first quarter. So I think this is a game where we see the Rams get up 14-0 or 17-0 pretty early and kind of control the tempo of the game. And a reason that I've stayed away from a lot of Burrow props or receiver props or anything like that, even though I am bullish on this Rams defense, is because I do think we could see a scenario where it's 14-0 and then the Bengals are airing it out for 4 quarters and we get some garbage time points and yards. And that's why I'm not touching the total either. So I'm very confident in I'll just run them all down here. Rams first quarter, Rams first half, Rams -4. I've got Rams to win the Super Bowl from the preseason. I have those Donald and Von Miller MVP bets that I mentioned. And then I'm sure you have a couple props as well. So I've got a couple props, but do you got any more props for me besides that T. Higgins one?
Yeah, no, that was my big one. I really liked the T. Higgins over 5.5. I liked him over 71.5 yards. He's hit both of those numbers in each of their last 2 games. The Raiders game, he only had 1 catch, but it seems like his teams have started to focus on Jamar Chase. Higgins has been the beneficiary, and Higgins just has a great matchup with the number 2 for the Rams if it gets to that point. So I really liked that one. I was looking at the Mixon under rushing yardage total.
I was just going to bring that up.
Just because Mixon has not played well, like you mentioned, and he's going against the Rams, who have the best run defense in the NFL. So I like that one. I liked the Rams first half spread, and of course I think the Rams win the game at -4. And yeah, we're of the same mind on a lot of these. I have the Donald and Von Miller co-MVP bets because the MVP is going to be from the winning team. If it does come from the Rams, you have to imagine that Burrow was under a lot of pressure. Mm-hmm. And then it just depends on, who the storyline goes to, who got the strip sack, or, who hit Joe Burrow as he was throwing the pass that gets intercepted. Whichever one of those guys it is, I think would have a pretty good shot. Because I don't see this being a game that, Matthew Stafford's going to light it up and throw for 300 yards and 4 touchdowns. Maybe it becomes that, but I like the Bengals defense better than that. So, a lot of what you said, I don't have the first quarter one, but I may go look at that now.
Yeah, I had that Mixon prop you mentioned for the reasons we discussed with Mark Schofield. He's only hit that one of the last 8 games. And I do think, like I said, if the Rams get up early, I do think that the Bengals will abandon the run. They're not going to be running the ball on first down. Can you believe that stat that I found? I was looking for that stat all over the place before we went on this pod. If you would have the tweets that all I was trying to find, 17 of his 21 runs were on first down. I knew it felt like a lot of first down runs, but that is absurd.
It's like they were running to get to 2nd and 9 to ensure they didn't take a sack and end up with 2nd and 15.
I know that drives you just as crazy as it drives me.
Absolutely. That's what I said. This would be a great game for Joe Burrow to just claim his headset went out and just ignore the plays, call your own. And like, what's going on? He's like, my headset's out. And they try it out on the side and like, oh, it's working now. And then he just runs out and ignores it again and be like, sorry, coach, it went out again. I don't know. I will say this, though. I feel like for the most part, and I'm not a big Zach Taylor fan. I don't think you are either. I do feel like that he has done a decent job of staying out of Joe Burrow's way. Mm-hmm. Like, see a lot of coaches come in and this is my scheme. This is how we're going to do it, blah, blah, blah. I feel like he's done a pretty good job of, for the most part, staying out of Joe Burrow's way. And so I guess you can at least give him credit for realizing he's not a very good coach and letting his quarterback do his thing.
Yeah, no, I think that you actually can give him some credit for that. I think just not ruining Joe Burrow, I guess, because we've seen plenty of coaches ruin quarterbacks. Justin Herbert, he's got a couple now, but we talked about Joe Mixon. The other 2 props, I don't know if you'll love based on a couple of the things you said. I do have Matt Stafford over 278.5 passing yards. It doesn't make a lot of sense with my game flow and how I'm viewing this game playing out, it's really just a trends play. He's thrown for over that in 13 to 20 games this year. And one of the 7 games that he didn't, he hit 278. So he was short by a half a yard. So that's really just a historic trends play. And then I've got my one Bengals play, my one positive Bengals prop is Jamar Chase anytime touchdown scorer. He's got 14 touchdowns in 20 games. So I think the implied odds of that are way better than plus 100. If you're giving me literally 50-50 chance that he'll score a touchdown, he's shown that you should take that chance. So I would bet that up to like minus 130. And like I said with Mark, I'm not taking these because I like the Rams to win. But if you're out there and you like the Bengals, not just to cover, but if you're going to go bet the Bengals to win, don't do it. You're wasting money. Go bet Joe Burrow to be MVP at plus 220 instead of betting the money line at plus 160. And if you're worried that it's going to be Jamar Chase, sprinkle on Jamar Chase at plus 1,800 as well. And if one of them hits, you'll come out more ahead than you would have if you just bet on the money line.
Yeah, I don't see it. Jamar Chase isn't going to be the MVP. I mean, for one, it's a quarterback award.
I tend to agree. Yeah.
For two, if the Bengals win, it's going to be because Joe Burrow had a crazy day. He's going to be shrugging off sacks, running away from pressure all day. And even if Jamar Chase has,
you would have to be like 2 screens. You would have to take like 2 screens to the house. Yeah.
Yeah. Even if he's got like 150 yards and 2 touchdowns, which isn't likely against Jaylen Ramsey, I still think that Burrow probably gets that because it just tends to be a quarterback award. So, yeah.
I agree there.
It does feel weird that I've picked the Rams. I've got money all over the Rams, but I'm going to be pulling for the Bengals in this game. I want the Bengals to win.
We want our bets to hit, Shane. We're
united.
We're a united front. We've got Von Miller and Aaron Donald. We've got the first half line together. We've got Joe Mixon's under. We've got the spread. Us on Chalk Talk. We're rooting for the Rams. I don't care about any goodwill, any good feelings. Shane knows I like Joe Burrow as much as anyone. I've been beating the Joe Burrow train for 3 months, really.
I know, and if Burrow wins, it hurts my Justin Herbert side of the Joe Burrow Justin Herbert take. But
we can give that one up. Already.
We're not giving that up. But I guess it's a good place to be in. It's kind of like back when I first started gambling several years ago, when I wasn't into it very much. I just started I would bet against the Eagles every game. So either I would win money or I'd be happy because the Eagles won. So it was just either way, I'm going to get out of this game happy. I guess that's how I feel about the Super Bowl. Because I'm either going to hit a bunch of bets or the Bengals are going to win, which is who I honestly prefer.
Yeah, there's no goodwill reason to root for the Rams. And maybe Andrew Whitworth has 41. He gave some really depressing quotes last time they lost the Super Bowl. So I hope for that guy's sake he wins. I just don't
want to have to listen to the media just fawn over Sean McVay. Which they already do.
Mind. Yeah, I don't. A lot of people have that. One of my best friends can't stand McVay, and anytime that there's the McVay segments talking about how great he is, he loses his mind. For me, what'll bother me is everyone vaulting Matt Stafford into being a top 5 quarterback when really I think 15 to 20 quarterbacks could probably win a Super Bowl with that roster. But that'll bother me more than anything. But no matter what, I'm rooting for my units. I'm rooting for the Chalk Talk gambling account here.
The Chalk Talk gambling account. We should do that. That's what we need. We need a Twitter account, Chalk Talk Gambling, and we tweet out all the picks.
Yeah. No, next year, I swear, we'll do a better job tracking our picks and our overs and stuff like that.
For sure. All right. Well, let's toss it around the NFL for a couple things here. I want to hit on a couple of topics. The first thing here, Mark, I want to get your reaction. I talked about it a little bit last week solo, but let's get your reaction on the Washington Commanders. What are your thoughts about the Washington Commanders?
So I really disliked it when I first heard it. And there's the jokes, there's one inappropriate joke. I was going to say it out loud. I won't cancel myself. I won't say it. But then this is a family show. So there obviously will be the Let's Go Commies. They're in Washington, D.C.
The Washington Commies.
There will be some communism references for sure about Dan Snyder. And, I'm sure he'll get compared to people that are not fond to be compared to the Communist Party. But the Commanders, I'm kind of fine with it now. I was up in arms about it for a day. It does definitely sound like it's from a movie that didn't get the rights to the football names. But I guess that's how any name sounds when you first hear it. It's not a good name. It's not a fun name. I'd stick with the animals. I'd almost always just go with an animal. I was fine with the hogs. I kind of liked red hogs or something that stuck with their tradition. They don't their fans wear like the noses or whatever because they had an O-line back in the day. Yeah, they should have stuck with something like that. Or I think Red Wolves had some like anti-racism meetings to it involving the military. I'm not exactly sure, but I think there was an African-American infantry or something like that.
The Red Tails?
The Red Tails, not Red Wolves. Yeah, Red Tails. I would have been fine with that as well. But yeah, it's probably like it was the worst name I heard, I guess, brought up. So I guess that's not a great sign.
Yeah, I don't like it. Of course, I said it's a real hit or miss. It's mostly miss when teams unveil rebranding stuff. Everybody hated the Rams' new logo, which, to be honest, is still trash.
Yeah.
Everybody hates the Commanders. I feel like when a team's going to rebrand, they should just be like, hey, we're going to rebrand, and then just sit on it for a year and look at all the fan concept stuff that comes out, because there was some cool stuff that was out there, and just pick your favorite. But I thought Commanders was dumb. Like, to be honest, I thought football team was dumb when they first did it, but it kind of grew on me. I kind of liked football team. I might have just kept the Washington football team. But my favorite thing about the rebranding, I don't know if you notice anything off on this crest here, maybe right in this area. So they listed three titles. Yeah, they listed their dates for their titles. And so this is in the Super Bowl era. They listed 1983, 1988, 1992. They won the Super Bowls in 1982, 1987, and 1991.
I get it.
Game played after, but that's like the Eagles don't talk about winning the Super Bowl in 2018. We won the Super Bowl in 2017. Like the game itself was 2018, but it was the 2017 season. I thought that was hilarious. That
is funny. Yeah.
That they put 83, 88, and 92 on there. Just they're totally out of touch. And I hated that team name. I still hate it, but that's okay. They can. The most common joke I've heard is about how they will command the bottom of the NFC East, and I can roll with that. I can have fun with that.
Yeah, and I have a nice little segue. I don't know if we're done talking about this, but a segue. And the reason that I'm confident they'll be in the bottom of the NFC East is because I'm a little bit nervous about what's going on with the New York Football Giants. There's some semblance of competence running through that organization that hasn't ran through it in a really long time.
Yeah, so they fired Dave Gettleman, and they could have hired my grandma, and that would have been an upgrade at GM. So I don't know a ton about the GM. I don't need to know that he's better than. I don't know that. I don't need to know anything to know he's better than Gettleman. You could hire anybody off the street. That homeless guy that told the Browns to draft Johnny Manziel could have done Dave Gettleman's job better. So they get rid of Gettleman, they cut that anchor, and then they go hire Brian Dable, which you and I are both very high on. Fantastic hire. And then news just broke today that they're hiring Wink Martindale to be their defensive coordinator. So massive upgrades, in my opinion, at three really important positions: GM, head coach / play caller, defensive coordinator. They sit there with 2 picks in the top 7. Like, if they can get the quarterback thing figured out, and I'm not sure this is the class to address it, but hey, if Brian Dable likes one of these guys, go get him. They're a team that could very much be on there. I tweeted earlier today that Giants fans should feel optimistic for the first time in quite a while.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. If you're a Giants fan, you should be pumped. I will say they're saying all the right things about Daniel Jones. If they actually believe that, my opinion of them decreases. And my opinion of Brian Dable decreases if he really wants to go in with Daniel Jones. But whatever. I really do think that they have the 5th and 7th pick. You're not going to have 2 first-round picks next year probably. So you should probably lock in a quarterback, whether that be going and getting a guy in the trade market or whether that be drafting Kenny Pickett, Malik Willis, Carson Strong, any of these guys. I really think that that's something they need to do this year to kind of move on and get all the stink from that previous era off. Get Daniel Jones out. You got Judge out. You got Gettleman out. Get all of it out and start brand new. I think that there's plenty to be excited about with New York.
And then moving to a team that there's nothing to be excited about. You got the Houston Texans, who are announcing Lovie Smith as their head coach. And by the way, I don't know if you saw this, during the introductory press conference, the fire alarm went off in the building and they all had to evacuate. Hilarious. So just a perfect microcosm for where this organization's at. I mean, I don't get it. I don't get why they fired the last guy. He got 4 wins in a season when you were expected to have the number 1 pick. Maybe that's why they fired him. Maybe they wanted him to get the number 1 pick. I don't know. But you fire that guy, a guy who got Davis Mills, an overdrafted 3rd-round rookie, to show some flashes. Maybe you could. I don't think he's a guy, but you can at least start him and not be a laughingstock next year. And they fire him and they hire Lovie Smith, a guy who missed the playoffs 5 of his last 6 years in Chicago. Then he went 8-24 in 2 years in Tampa. And then he went to college to Illinois, where he went 17-39 over 5 years.
17-39.
Yeah, at Illinois. And he was fired at each of his previous 3 stops, and now he's the Texans head coach. And I just don't get why. I don't understand.
He couldn't be more of a retread. Like, he could not be more of a retread. And what I'm about to say might not be very PC. But I will preface that what I'm going to say by what happened this offseason with coaching hires and what has happened the last 5 years is a crime. It is absolutely criminal what has happened to guys like Eric Bieniemy, Byron Leftwich, Todd Bowles, many other names. That doesn't mean that Brian Flores' lawsuit and that everything going on should have impacted the Houston Texans' decision as much as it clearly did. Because it seems like they announced there was 3 final candidates. It was Josh McCown, Jonathan Gannon, and Brian Flores. And it seems like they were going with, and it seemed they had informed Jonathan Gannon he wouldn't be getting the job. So it seemed that they were down to Josh McCown and Brian Flores. And I think that how you end up on a guy that you weren't initially planning to interview. They released 10 names they were going to interview. They weren't going to interview Lovie Smith. I think it shows a lot. They were down to 2 final candidates, the one guy suing the NFL, and then a completely unproven, inexperienced, non-coaching former player that they clearly wanted to bring in because Jack Easterby goes to church with him or whatever it may be the case. They clearly were going to do that and then got cold feet because of this Flores thing. They got cold feet. You can either say that they got cold feet hiring an inexperienced guy in McCown and they decided to go the safe route, bringing in a guy that they wouldn't get criticized for bringing in Lovie Smith because of the Rooney Rule and because of everything that's went on in this hiring process, or they decided we're not going to hire Brian Flores because of the lawsuit. So either way, I think the lawsuit completely dictated what happened in this coaching search. And I think that's just as shameful as the fact that none of these African-American coaches can get hired.
Which, would you just go hire Josh McCown to be your QB coach already? Seriously, it's obvious they wanted him to be their head coach last year. They wanted him to be their head coach this year. And they're like, well, we can't because nobody else will consider it. He doesn't have experience. Just give him go hire him to be your quarterback coach. And this time next year, when you fire Lovie Smith, you can promote him and people won't throw as big of a stink about it. I like Josh McCown. I hear the stories that came out of Philly, how helpful he was to Carson Wentz, which we saw how that turned out, but how helpful he was to some of the wide receivers. Even they were talking about him coaching wide receivers in practice. I think he's played a
little wide receiver.
Yeah, I think he's a good football mind. Get him in the building. If that's what you want, get him in the building. Let him be there for a couple of years so you can legitimize that. But I just don't understand the public flirtation with Josh McCown every year. And then Josh McCown continues to not even coach anywhere.
Yeah, I think it's at this point, though, if you bring him in, Lovie Smith's got to be staring at him and looking over his shoulder the entire time. So it's so
he should be anyways. They just fired the last guy who won 4 games without Deshaun Watson or J.J. Watt or DeAndre Hopkins.
Yeah, he did a great job. What happened to David Culley's a shame. But, yeah, I'm sure the same thing's going to happen to Lovie, and I'm sure that they will eventually bring in Josh McCown. But, anytime your NFL team hires a guy that the Illinois Fighting Illini fired, going 17-39 and being the worst team in the Big Ten. And then, by the way, they fired him last year, I believe. I think this was the first year they were without him.
Mid-2020.
They just had their best year in a decade. The first year he left, they brought in the name's escaping me. He used to coach at Wisconsin and Arkansas. The name's escaping me. But they brought in this guy to be their coach, and he's completely turned around the culture. And I think they were bowl eligible this year. So, they got real lucky and got better.
People point to him making it to the Super Bowl with the Bears. And it's yeah, but then he let his defensive coordinator, guy by the name of Ron Rivera, might have heard of him, let him go after that offseason, and then he missed the playoffs 5 out of the last 6 years, and then they fired him. So I don't like it. But speaking of coaches that got fired in college and then inexplicably got NFL jobs, let's flip over to Arizona real quick. Last point I've got here, and we can get out of here unless you got something else. But Cliff Kingsbury, we've enumerated reasons all season that Cliff Kingsbury needs to go. But now we've got Kyler Murray unfollowing the Cardinals on social media, which, by the way, if I was an athlete bored in the offseason, I would do stuff like this all the time. Just tweet out like the cryptic thinking emoji or the random like people aren't what you think they are that has nothing to do with sports, and just see where people run with it, because I think it'd be fun to troll people. But what do you make of this whole situation in Arizona with Murray?
Yeah, I think they'd be really bad without him. So I think they should do whatever he wants them to do to, fix whatever he's upset about. Cliff Kingsbury is a train wreck. I hate how he's handled Kyler. I do think Kyler's gotten a lot of criticism for how the end of the season went and how the end of the last couple seasons have went. I think you can attribute that to DeAndre Hopkins' health. I think not having an NFL receiver out there as a number one has really killed Kyler. And then I think you can also attribute it to Cliff Kingsbury, because you can look at his Texas Tech days. He closes every season that he coaches very poorly. Every team that he coaches starts hot and finishes poorly, and that's just a Cliff Kingsbury trait. So until they get rid of Cliff Kingsbury, I can't imagine what types of moves Arizona could make that would make me take them more seriously.
Yeah, you mentioned how he closes every season. I'll share this tweet here because we've talked about it on this show before, but Kingsbury's into seasons as a head coach. In 2013 through 2018 at Texas Tech, he lost 5 of his last 6, 4 of his last 6, 4 of his last 6, 6 of 8, 6 of 8, and 5 of 5. Got fired. Got the Cardinals job, where he's lost 7 of 9, 5 of 7, and 5 of 6. So just not a guy that can close seasons out. And like I said, so perfectly that his teams always fall off a cliff. And I just had to make that joke and throw it out here for Mark again. But
it's the worst.
So here's my thought. Kyler Murray's upset. Maybe he wants out of Arizona. I'd call Arizona up, and I'd offer him a whole bunch of first-round picks and Jalen Hurts to get Kyler Murray into Philadelphia, which would be kind of funny. Be kind of ironic if Jalen Hurts got shipped out to Arizona and now he was playing with Zach Ertz again, reunited with Zach Ertz. But
that's funny. Yeah, I would do the same thing. I would give up 2 or 3 first-round picks. I'd give up Jalen Hurts. I'd give up a second. And people will say, oh, but you won't do that for Rodgers or Wilson. Kyler's young. So this is not a win-now move. This would be a future move as well. So if there was any reason or if there was any way that we could get Kyler Murray, I would make it happen.
Right, Kyler Murray is 24 years old. I'd do that in a heartbeat. So it wouldn't have to change the offense a whole lot in terms of how you're going to scheme your running game. But you could definitely open up the vertical passing game. So,
absolutely.
All right. Well, that's about all I've got. Mark, do you have any final thoughts or anything else you want to throw out there before we get out of here?
If you're a Sixers fan, if you're an NBA fan, then you will be like me. You will be following the next couple days. Every notification you get onto your phone could be the one that ships Ben Simmons out of town or gets James Harden into town, and who knows what happens. Most likely nothing. But for anyone out there like me for the next 3 days who are just going to be waiting on every notification on their phone, don't do something to get away from your phone. Do something to get out. Stop thinking about it. But I credit myself for going an hour and 8 minutes without saying the names Ben Simmons or James Harden. So, that's good enough for me.
For my final thought, I'll just throw out there, I saw on Twitter that Jalen Reagor is spending the first part of his offseason in Dallas. I would love for Jalen Reagor to just stay there.
Yeah.
So Howie, call the Cowboys up, tell them they can have him. They don't even have to trade you anything. Just take him. Take him in his contract. We'll throw in a 7th-round pick. Get that dude out of here.
And we'll sign Michael Gallup.
There you go, and we'll sign Michael Gallup. We'll sign Michael Gallup so you get a comp pick for it.
Exactly.
All right. Well, thank you guys, as always, for joining us for episode number 42 of Chalk Talk. If you enjoy what you heard on the show, and we know that you do, be sure you smash that subscribe button so you don't miss the next episode. Drop us a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts. We're about to get deep into draft content. Thursday, we've got a show coming up ranking our top 5 quarterback prospects. We're going to do that for each division on the lead up to the draft, so be sure you're tuning into those and tracking along with us. You can follow me on Twitter at @halfandhalf_TPL. You can follow Mark at MarkHenryJr_. So for me, from Mark, from the Painted Lions, we'll see you guys next time.